Hey, friends. Welcome to Choosing to Rise, a podcast about growth, faith, and transformation. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Kennedy, and I am so glad that you're here with me today. Have you ever been in a season of your life where you feel like your plate is just full? And I don't mean like buffet restaurant full. You know, like when you get to pile it up with bacon, in the case of when I was doing keto and I got to go to the Shoney's restaurant and pile up with all of that bacon. I definitely got my money's worth then. But what I mean by your plate being full is more of like a sense of being overwhelmed. So when you feel like you've got so much on your plate that you couldn't possibly put one more thing on that plate. And the thing about it is that overwhelm doesn't necessarily mean that the things on your plate are bad or negative or even that you don't want them on your plate. If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone, because that's where I am right now. So I'm currently working on all the things. Let's see. Obviously, being a wife and a mother, trying to remain active in my church, balancing a full-time job, also preparing for an upcoming possible speaking opportunity at a conference in Nashville. I am planning my first Women's EmpowerCon. More to come about that later. I am trying to keep all of the different projects that I'm working on moving forward effectively, efficiently, all of the things. And so my plate is absolutely full. But I don't think I'd have it any other way. Like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And yes, there's a sense of overwhelm, a definite sense of overwhelm, but not necessarily in a bad way. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's definitely where I'm at. And so it causes me, or it is causing me, to stop and think about this season that I'm in right now and thinking about what do I need to be doing? What do I need to think about? And how do I frame this to make sure that I'm approaching things in the right way? And I have to stop myself and think about the fact that I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't even necessarily have to know where the maze is going to lead me. I just have to be okay with taking that next faithful step. Being intentional, though, with what that next step is. And it also is causing me to stop and think that I need to practice what I preach. I absolutely believe that choosing to rise is a choice that we make every day, and oftentimes more than once in the day. And I believe that what we've got to do is think about how can we help each other to rise? How do we rise better together? Because we weren't meant to do life alone. We weren't meant to do things in isolation. And we absolutely should and could help each other to rise and to thrive. And like I say, to bring others along with us on that journey. So today, I am shamelessly asking for your help. Why? Because your voice matters. I have recently written and published my first of 4 in a series called When You're Ready. This first book is called When You're Ready to Begin, a 13-week journey through this season of rising. In a previous episode, I talked to you about what I call the compass seasons. And I believe that we go through seasons of rising, reflecting, renewal, and thriving. And we don't go through them in a linear fashion. It's not like we go through one and we complete that one and we celebrate, we raise the roof, and then we move on to the next one. There are absolutely seasons that we're going to come in and out of throughout of our life. We can absolutely be in more than one season at a time for different aspects of our life. And it's not that one season is good and another season is bad. It's not that, once we reach thriving in an area of our life, we can say, we've arrived, because we never have and we never will. But it's understanding that different things in our life or different seasons in our life call us to respond in different ways. And so the first book is looking at rising. And I'm working on, or at least I've started working on, book 2. And I would love to make sure, because from my previous episodes that I struggle with perfectionism and self-doubt and all of the things. But anyway, like I said, I'm talking it because I'm living it. So I would love to know that the book works for someone other than me. I know that it works with the way that I think and with the way that I process things and the way that I think about things. But I need to know, or I would love to know, that it works for other people too. So let me tell you a little bit about the structure. And hopefully you can either, well, if you've read the book already, I'd love for you to give me a review on Amazon, Goodreads, or just simply send me a direct message, or, email or something, reach out to someone, let me know. And if you haven't, if you'll at least listen to the structure and listen to me tell you about it, and then maybe you can tell me what you think. And if there's something that you think works really well for you, or if there's something that you think I might want to consider adjusting or tweaking as I'm working on the next book, and book 3 and book 4 after that. So the way that I structured the book, oftentimes when you think about a devotional, we think about a daily devotional. But for me personally, I need more time. I can't process things in just a day. If I'm going to be able to look at it, dig deep into the biblical connection and then my personal connection, I need time to sit in it and grapple with it and to really think and dig deep into that concept. So because of that, and like I said, not saying that that works for everybody, and not saying that there's anything wrong with a daily devotional, just the way that my mind works, I need more time. And maybe that's saying something about me, not sure, but I need more time. And so I've structured my book as weekly devotionals, so that way we grapple with and we sit with the same message for a week, and we go back and we reread it. And just like if you've ever watched your favorite movie or your favorite book that you've read, you probably get something out of it when you read it the second time or you watch the movie the second time. I know there's some movies that I've watched a dozen times and I feel like I get something new, something small, something new that I catch each time that I watch it. And so the way that I've structured the book, like I said, is in weekly devotionals, so that way we go back and we revisit it each day of that week. And so the other thing that I've done intentionally with the book is I wanted to make sure that you didn't need to have the text in one place and then a place to work through and journal and to write about, scribble through separately. I wanted the two to be combined. So the way that I've structured the book is that there's actually blank pages in each week, or a blank page in each week for you to journal. There is places for you to respond to reflection questions, to check boxes, to fill in the blank, because I wanted it to be integrated. So that way you weren't having to stop from one place and then pick up your journal separately and then journal in that separate. I wanted them to be combined. I hope that makes sense. So let me tell you a little bit about the structure of the book. So I told you how it's a weekly devotional instead of a daily, and I told you how it's got the journaling space. But also, partly because I have OCD tendencies as well as ADHD tendencies and a whole lot of other tendencies, but that's probably about 5 separate episodes there, all on its own. But the book is very much a structure, and I find comfort in that because then I know what to expect from week to week. I don't know if it works that way for everybody else or if you'd prefer to have variety from week to week, but I like a predictable structure. So it helps me to be my daily routine when I'm going through the devotional. And it's not about what is today going to be different, or how is today? It's about I know exactly what I'm walking into or sitting down with when I sit down and pick up my book. So hopefully that works for you, and hopefully that resonates for you as well. So the book starts out with, of course, telling you a little bit about the why behind the reason I wrote the book, the preface for the book, the acknowledgement, the dedication. And then it tells you a little bit about the compass seasons, which, like I said, I mentioned to you guys already in a previous episode, and I talked a little bit about here already. And then it talks about the how to use the book. So it tells you about each one of the structures of the week. And so each week begins with, of course, the weeks are titled. There's a theme. There's a biblical or a anchor Bible verse for each week. Then there's what I call a vignette, and that vignette is either a short, and I do mean short, a short little personal story or a personal reflection from my own life. And then I wanted to make sure that it ties in not just by providing the anchor Bible verse, but also a story from the Bible. So there's a biblical connection for each week as well. And then, as a good friend of mine mentioned, kind of like that buffet, you want a to-go plate. So she reminded me that whenever we have conversations, especially if we're trying to help guide other people, we need to make sure that we give them what they can take with them. short little snippets, those little, the to-go plate that you get after you go to someplace good to have dinner. So luckily, even before that conversation with her, I had already structured the book to have what I call in it mini truths to remember. And when I say mini, I mean M-I-N-I, not M-A-N-Y. So it's many truths to remember. And so that's just pulling like 4 or 5 little nuggets from the personal story and from the biblical connection as what is it that we can take with us, that we can remember, that we can apply to our lives. And so that's why it's called many truths to remember. Each week, of course, has a weekly affirmation. I love a good affirmation. As you'll probably notice in my social media where I post the Monday Moments to Rise. Technically, the ones that I've been posting recently come from this book. And then also each week has a section called Choose to Rise. And the reason behind that is also intentional. Much like my good friend that talked about the to-go plate, I have another good friend that talks to me a lot about being mindful and about being intentional. She doesn't think I listen, but I do. It just sometimes takes me a little bit longer than I think she's used to for me to process it and apply it. But I absolutely listen, and I absolutely agree. And so the Choose to Rise is all about what intentional step, even if it's something small, but what intentional step are we going to take that week to move us forward, to help us to rise, to help us to choose, to make the decision to move forward. What is that one step? And then also, just like I end every single one of my podcasts, each week has one good hello to give. And the reason behind that is simple. Like I said before, we're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to do this in community with one another, and we're meant to bring other people along with us. So it's truly about helping someone else, to inspire, to encourage, to support, to help others know that they're seen, that they're heard, that they have value, and that their journey matters. Because that's one of the biggest things I think that we need to remember, is that all of us are just ordinary people. But it's the ordinary that makes us extraordinary. I don't know if that makes sense, but we're ordinary people living a life, living a journey that is absolutely extraordinary. And in our ordinary, we can do so much to help other people. We can do so much to help other people to rise, help other people to be seen, and help them to know that they have value and that they matter. And in turn, they then can pour that into somebody else and pay that forward to other people as well. So the one good hello to give, although it's something very, very small, it's absolutely significant. It's absolutely crucial, in my opinion, at least anyway. Every week also then has reflection questions, because it is a devotional, and we're looking at then, how does this apply to me? What can I take away? What am I learning? What can I do differently? Or what do I want to keep doing that is serving the right purpose? What is it that I need to keep doing that is working well and that doesn't need to be changed? And then tying in with the theme of the compass seasons, each week ends with a My Compass moment. And looking at, the compass isn't about north, east, south, and west. The compass isn't about telling you where you need to go. The compass is about helping you to see where you are. Sometimes we don't really see where we are. Sometimes we're so lost in the weeds, lost in the web, lost in all of what's going on around us, that we don't necessarily have a clear picture of where we are. And so that's what the compass is about, at least my compass and my mind. It's about that soul deep level of pointing us toward, or highlighting for us, where we are, not telling us where to go, but helping us to see where we already are. So if you'll indulge me, I would love to read to you from week 3. Why? Because 3 is my favorite number. Don't ask me why for that part. I don't have a reason, at least not one that I can think of. But 3 has always been my favorite number. So I'm going to read to you from week 3 because it was the easiest way for me to pick which week. And then from that, we're going to, I'd love your feedback. I want to know what works for you, what I could do differently, or what I should keep doing, or whether or not it matters to you, whether or not it resonates for you. So from when you're ready to begin, and I'm reading to you from, I don't know if you can see it here, Week 3. I don't think I can get that in there yet. There you go. Week 3. All right. The title is Breaking Free from Self-Doubt. And the theme, Trusting What God Sees. The anchor Bible verse for this week comes to us from 2 Corinthians 3:5. And I use the King James Version throughout my books. Not because it's the easiest to understand, but because I guess it's the most timeless. And in that, it's also in the public domain, which means that I can use it freely. So, from the King James Version. And if King James Version doesn't resonate with you, you can still take the verse itself and then use whatever translation of the Bible best aligns and best speaks to you. But for, like I said, purposes here, I'm using King James. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. 2 Corinthians 3:5. And then the vignette, or my personal story for this week. The calling was real. The confidence took time. I didn't immediately recognize God's invitation to write, speak, and serve as a true calling. At first, it felt more like a whisper of an idea that I was afraid to say out loud. And when I finally did, the responses I got didn't build my confidence or affirm my direction. I had excitedly told a colleague about my decision to become an author. They responded by asking, "Oh, have you published anything?" I explained that I was in the process of publishing my dissertation as a book. The way they said, "Oh," paired with the look on their face, said everything that they didn't. The message was clear. A dissertation didn't count. I wasn't a real author. That quiet dismissal settled in, and for a while, I let it shape how I saw myself. And as the enemy often does, he tried to use more than one voice to plant the same seed of doubt. When I told a close friend I was exploring public speaking, she looked at me, confused, and asked, "Why would anyone want to come hear you speak?" She may not have meant it to hurt, but it did. It echoed a question I already asked myself in quiet moments. Who am I to do this? What do I have to say that's worth listening to? Even as I took bold steps to launch my business and put myself out there, I received my first 5-star review on Google, a review that I had requested. But instead of celebrating, I found myself doubting. Did they truly mean what they had written? Or were they just being kind? I told myself it didn't count, that it wasn't earned, that they were just trying to be nice out of a sense of obligation. That's what self-doubt does. It made me question my voice. It downplayed my progress. It convinced me that the titles I've stepped into, such as author, speaker, and life coach, were too big for someone like me. God never speaks in the voice of self-doubt. As he did with Gideon, he speaks identity before performance. He called Gideon a mighty warrior, while Gideon was still hiding in fear. And now, before the book sells, before the bookings, before the titles fully feel like mine, God has already declared that I am chosen and I am enough. I am still learning to fully accept that following my calling to help, guide, and serve others is an act of obedience. Still learning to stand in what he says is true. Still choosing to rise even when my voice shakes and the old doubts return. But every time I say, yes, I am an author. I am a speaker. I am called. I am breaking the chain of self-doubt a little more. And so that's an example of the vignettes or the short stories that come with each week. And so after that title, the theme, the anchor Bible verse, and the vignette, the next section is the biblical connection. And so let me read this one to you. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, He was not standing on a battlefield or kneeling in prayer. He was hiding, threshing wheat in a winepress, an act that should have been done out in the open, but fear had driven him into secrecy. The Midianites had ravaged the land, and Gideon, like many others, were surviving in silence. The angel spoke to Gideon, saying, "The Lord is with thou, thou mighty man of valor." Judges 6:12. There is no missing the irony. Gideon didn't feel mighty. He didn't feel chosen, and he certainly didn't feel brave. Instead of receiving the words, he questioned them. He questioned God, questioned himself, and questioned the logic of being chosen at all. "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied. "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my family." Paraphrased from Judges 6:15. But Gideon's reaction didn't catch God by surprise. He didn't adjust the assignment or offer reassurance based on Gideon's resume. He simply said, "Surely I will be with thee." Judges 6:16. That's the heart of the story. Not Gideon's ability, but God's presence. Not Gideon's confidence, but God's calling. Gideon would go on to lead an army of just 300 men against impossible odds and win. But the true battle wasn't on the field. It was in his mind. It was in the quiet war between doubt and belief, fear and faith, inadequacy and identity. We fight that same battle. Sometimes we hide our gifts. We downplay our value. We disqualify ourselves before we even begin. But God still calls us right there in the winepress of our own fear. He speaks strength into our silence and steadies us in the shaking. He reminds us that courage doesn't mean we don't tremble. It means we move anyway, knowing we are not alone. Self-doubt may shout loudly, but God's truth stands firm. You are more than what you fear. You are called, equipped, never alone. And so after the biblical connection for each week, then I offer a weekly affirmation, a simple phrase or simple sentence. For this week it is, "My confidence is in God, and He has equipped me for every good work." Now on to the to-go plate, as my friend calls it, or as I call it, the many truths to remember. So from that whole story, or the vignette, and then the biblical connection, I pulled out 4 things to remember. God calls us before we feel ready and equips us as we go. Second, your worth isn't measured by credentials or confidence, but by His calling. Third, self-doubt may whisper, but God's truth speaks louder. And fourth, you are already becoming who He's always known you to be. And then for our choose to rise, that intentional step. This week, take an intentional step toward rising in faith and confidence. Ask God, what insecurities or doubts have I allowed to speak louder than your truth? Write down one lie you've believed about yourself, and next to it, write God's truth. Declare that truth each morning this week, out loud and with boldness. And as a bonus prompt, create a confidence in Christ affirmation card to keep with you. Whenever doubt creeps in, pull it out and speak life. And then one good hello to give. As I always do with our podcast before we part, this is what you can do to help uplift and encourage someone else. Affirm someone's gift. Let them know what you see in them, even if they haven't fully claimed it yet. And then the chapter or the weeks end after that with reflection questions, and then the My Compass moment. So I would love to hear your feedback, whether or not you feel that structure the framework behind this series, if it resonates to you, if it works for you. I'd love to know what things you like, and I need to know what things don't work well for you. As I said before, your journey and your voice matters to me, and I'm writing for you. And I want to make sure that the writing matters to you, that it resonates with you. So I would greatly appreciate, and I welcome your feedback. I want to invite you along as I move from the season of rising to the season of reflecting. So please reach out, whether on comments on the podcast, message me through my website, onegoodhello.com, and that's all spelled out, ONEGOODHELLO.com, onegoodhello.com. Or you can message me on social media, or like I said, if you've bought the book, and I hope you have. But if you haven't, that's okay. But if you've bought the book, you could also leave me a review and comment on either Amazon or Goodreads. I truly want to know, before I get too deep into book 2, if there's something that I could do different that would better serve you. So, until we meet next time, thank you for indulging me. Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about the book, my process, and hopefully, thank you for giving me your feedback. Thank you for being a part of my journey. And until next time, continue to choose to rise and learn to thrive, one good hello at a time. Talk to you soon.